You assume that suffering contradicts divine wisdom. If reality is intelligent, why must pain exist? Why should awareness grow through struggle rather than ease? Ibn Arabi approached this question not with sentiment but with structure. He said every condition, pleasant or painful, is a form of divine disclosure. Nothing appears without purpose. Pain, therefore, is not outside the order of truth. It is one of its languages. When you call an experience wrong, you separate from what could teach you. For Ibn Arabi, suffering does not destroy understanding. It defines its edges. Every discomfort refines perception by exposing illusion. If reality is single and continuous, can any form within it, even suffering, stand as error? Ibn Arabi lived in 12th–13th century Andalusia and the Islamic East, where philosophy, law, and mysticism intertwined. He united them under what he called Wahdat al-Wujud, the unity of being. For him, all that exists is an expression of divine intelligence revealing itself through multiplicity. Confusion, grief, and clarity are not opposites in substance, only in function. Each displays a dimension of truth the other conceals. In his view, nothing escapes divine accuracy. What appears as suffering to partial sight is harmony seen from the wrong distance. If all existence belongs to the real, what part of life can be truly foreign to it? You instinctively resist discomfort. You divide experience into categories: good, bad, wanted, unwanted. That division shapes your world. Yet Ibn Arabi warned that resistance multiplies what it rejects. Pain opposed hardens into suffering. Pain understood becomes transformation. The event itself is neutral. The interpretation gives it meaning. When awareness meets what it dislikes, it meets its own boundary. The mind says this should not be, and in doing so doubles its burden. The weight you feel often comes not from the event, but from the judgment surrounding it. If you stop labeling the experience as threat, what remains? Sensation, or the story that names it suffering? Ibn Arabi explained that existence unfolds through opposites. Knowledge requires contrast. You cannot know peace without disturbance, clarity without confusion. Opposites are not enemies but reflections within one act of being. The human mind isolates them for comprehension, but reality holds them together as a single movement. Mercy and severity are two functions of one intelligence. What soothes you and what challenges you both perform revelation. Without friction, there would be no awareness of smoothness. Without pain, no understanding of ease. To demand only one half is to misunderstand the design. If opposites define one another, can pain truly oppose the perfection it helps reveal? Pain interrupts habit. It breaks the illusion that life proceeds under personal control. Ibn Arabi called this interruption a form of mercy. Not sentimental mercy, but corrective precision. Suffering exposes where dependence hides under pride. It shows that stability was borrowed, not owned. The shock of loss is not cruelty, but revelation. You were never the one sustaining life. Awareness expands not by acquiring comfort, but by losing distortion. Suffering strips away what resists understanding. You do not gain truth through addition. You recognize it through removal. If pain dismantles false certainty, is it destruction, or the moment clarity begins? According to Ibn Arabi, the finite condition of being human is not a defect. It is the mirror through which the infinite is known. Awareness requires boundaries to perceive itself. Limitation defines perception. Weakness reveals what strength is. Ignorance reveals what knowing means. The contrast itself is divine education. You are not asked to erase limitation but to understand it as the means of reflection. Pain exposes the point where finitude touches the infinite, the exact meeting of the created with the creator. If the infinite requires the finite to be recognized, can human imperfection ever be accidental? You call life unfair when it violates preference. The mind equates justice with comfort and mercy with relief. Ibn Arabi challenged this emotional equation. Divine justice, he said, is not equality of outcome but precision of purpose. Every event fits its role in the total pattern, though intellect perceives only fragments. The part judges the whole because it cannot see its context. The demand for fairness hides the deeper assumption that personal desire defines what should be. But truth obeys coherence, not comfort. If the real measures through wisdom rather than want, can what feels unfair still fall outside order? For Ibn Arabi, transformation begins not with endurance but with insight. To suffer consciously is to allow understanding to reshape perception. The same event that once crushed you becomes a disclosure of meaning. Resistance turns to comprehension. Tension becomes articulation. The world stops acting as an adversary and begins to function as instructor. Suffering is not healed by denial, but by recognition. Once its purpose is seen, its grip dissolves. Pain does not vanish, but its nature changes, and from attack to teaching. If all experience conveys intelligence, what remains to oppose the one who listens? You suffer most when you interpret life through the lens of ownership. This happened to me, the self says, and in that claim, pain becomes personal. Ibn Arabi exposed this as illusion. The me that claims injury is itself a construct, a pattern passing through awareness. When that pattern relaxes, pain remains as experience but loses its author. The sensation exists. The story vanishes. What remains is process without possession. Suffering becomes participation in the unfolding of being. If the self that clings to control dissolves, who remains to be hurt? And who then was ever the sufferer? Ibn Arabi's paradox is clear. Suffering does not obscure truth. It shapes the capacity to see it. What burns is what cleanses. The refinement of understanding requires friction, just as meaning requires contrast. Every limitation reveals what transcends it. The same event that seems to break you also expands your comprehension of unity. Rejecting pain rejects part of reality's curriculum. Embracing it as disclosure transforms it into wisdom. Thus, pain and insight are one continuous movement of awareness. The first is question, the second is answer. If suffering and light are stages of the same process, can either be complete without the other. To live this understanding does not mean to seek pain, but to stop misreading it. When difficulty arises, you ask, what assumption does this reveal? What reliance does this test? The focus shifts from complaint to comprehension. You still act, heal, and protect, but without resentment. Circumstances stop dividing into enemies and allies. Everything becomes expression of one intelligence, working through contrast to refine understanding. This is not detachment but precision, awareness free from distortion. If suffering no longer divides your perception, can life itself ever appear as conflict again? You began believing that suffering interrupts divine order. Ibn Arabi reversed that view. Pain is not a shadow of wisdom. It is its contour, the point where awareness learns its depth. Every limitation confirms the infinite that contains it. Every loss uncovers what cannot be lost. When resistance ends, revelation begins. The world's harshness no longer feels accidental, becomes instruction through contrast. You stop asking why suffering exists and start seeing what it unveils. The paradox resolves quietly. Pain and clarity are not two. Suffering shapes your light by removing what obstructs its recognition. If reality never errs, then what you called pain may have been precision all along.